Proverbs 27:1. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Welcome to My Dead Brothers podcast. This show is about that journey, seizing the day, the people, the moments, and the circumstances around us. Tyler Bolken talks about grit, grace, gratitude, and the gospel inside us for others. The 4 G's. Tyler is a man of faith, a family man with 3 kiddos, a Marine Corps veteran, and an amazing storyteller. It's time to seize the day. This is My Dead Brothers podcast, and this is Tyler Bolken.
All right, you guys, welcome to episode 3. I've got a very special guest on with me today. He's actually a close friend of mine, Kyle McNally. We have been friends for the better part of 10 years. And we've got the Marine Corps birthday upcoming. We've got Veterans Day. And I thought, what better guest to have on to talk about some of those things and also talk about Kyle. Kyle and I met early on in our Marine Corps careers in Maryland, where we were at our training school learning to become photojournalists, combat correspondents in the United States Marine Corps. And from that point forward, we've really just stayed in touch and been connected ever since. We both got stationed in North Carolina together, and we'll go more into that as the podcast unfolds. But I'm very excited to have Kyle on, and he has been working in the film industry for about 6 years. He served in the Marine Corps for 4 years, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. He's worked on shows such as True Detective, the Kominsky Method, The Last Ship, to name a few. We'll talk a little bit about that. I know that the last 8 months in particular has had quite an effect on the film industry, and Kyle's felt that firsthand. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about the Marine Corps birthday. Can't help but go into that. And just a little history lesson for any of you that may be curious as to why the Marines celebrate their birthday the way they do. Well, in several instances throughout American history, the Marine Corps at certain points has been essentially put on the chopping block, if you will. When it comes to the Department of Defense or just the defense of the United States, we've got an Air Force, we've got an Army, we've got a Navy, and a lot of people start to question, why do we have a Marine Corps? Why do they exist? So the Marine Corps, I think in many ways, we're turning 245. It's been ingrained in us to, be sure to remind people why we exist. And I think on our birthday in particular, that's one of those cases where we like to let everybody know that the Marine Corps is still alive and proud. So we will talk a little bit about that. And we're going to roll right into it. I don't want to talk too long. I want to introduce Kyle, but I wanted to start off with a quick story. So Kyle and I, we never celebrated a Marine Corps birthday together. It's usually something that you celebrate with your respective unit that you're assigned to at the time, and you get dressed up, you get together at a fancy place, you have dinner, you dance a little bit, you go through a lot of Marine Corps customs and courtesies, and overall it's a great night. So although Kyle and I never celebrated a birthday together per se, we celebrated in a different way that I think very much exemplified what those birthday celebrations represent. And what that was actually right when Kyle was getting ready to get out of the Marine Corps. This was in 2013. I was just starting my second enlistment. I decided to raise my hand and do 4 more years. And Kyle, meanwhile, was on his way back to Sacramento, California, which is where he's from. He's making the cross-country trek from coastal North Carolina and, basically leaving the Marine Corps in his rearview mirror. He was already starting to grow a beard at that point, had all of his uniforms stuffed tightly in a box to, be packed away and not be seen again for years. So he opted to make a quick stop in Arizona just to come visit me, and I was excited, I was happy for him, and, just a good time to catch up. And Kyle knew that I was working that weekend. I had a couple of Marine Corps functions. I was in on Marine Corps recruiting at the time, and Kyle stops by and it's like, Kyle, I've got this banquet dinner on Saturday night, it kind of stinks. I have to go to it, and it's an awesome dinner, by the way. It's Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation, awesome night. And I started thinking about it. I was like, Kyle, you know what? Why don't you come with me? Pull those blues out of that box, dust them off, and let's get dressed up. Meanwhile, Kyle had just been promoted a few months earlier to sergeant. And when you're at that stage in your Marine Corps career, when you're getting ready to get out, it's a pretty big bill to go out and get all of your uniforms altered and paid for. So, Kyle, what was the point, So he didn't have his uniforms updated for his new rank. And I told him, it's all right, Kyle, you can come and be my junior Marine with me, and we'll just flipping him some shit. We'll have a good time. So he had his beard coming in. So for the sake of the evening, Kyle decided to shave his nasty face, pulled out his blues. We ironed him up, got him ready, and we went to this charity dinner that evening. And man, it was a hell of a night. I don't think a lot of friends and family even heard this story. So we go to this dinner, and it started off on the wrong foot. Marines are very particular about their uniform, especially on an evening like that. So we drive from my house to this very nice resort in Scottsdale, and we get there. We're checking each other's uniforms out. And as much as I want to remember that this was Kyle in my mind to blame it on him, it was me. I forgot my buttons on my jacket. Kyle, he should have been the one that wasn't prepared and not ready for this. And meanwhile, it was me that had my uniforms prepped. So we rush back home, get my buttons, get my uniform squared away, and we walk into this dinner, have a great time. And that was just the beginning. Don't worry, I'm getting to the highlights here. We started drinking, and sure enough, as the night went on, we started to get, a little fueled up, and we ended up going after the dinner had concluded, we went over to a very nice restaurant right nearby. It's called the Ocean Club. For anybody that's from Scottsdale or been to Scottsdale, it's one of the finest places you can get dinner here in town. I had only lived here for about 6 months, mind you, so I wasn't familiar with what this place was. Kyle and I were just looking for a place to keep drinking. So we walk over here, and there's all these people in there dressed up, just having a nice night out eating dinner. And meanwhile, Kyle and I are starting to get a little sloppy at that point. And we walk in our uniforms and thinking we're war heroes. And people in there just start buying us drinks. And that wasn't a good combination for where we were at that point in the evening. And, I'll let Kyle kind of explain this as we get to the end here, but we started drinking, and before we knew it, the place had cleared out because this wasn't a nightclub. This was a nice dinner place. So we were already, outside of what we probably should have been doing at that point. But this guy, I want to say he was probably a 5'2", kind of short, fat white guy. And he had his pretty wife with him, which is a pretty common sight there in Scottsdale. And he comes up to Kyle and I, thinking we're the coolest guys in the place, which, when you put the dress blues on, you kind of draw that aura. And he asks us if we want to keep drinking and go out. And I'm like, yeah, sure, why the hell not? And we go outside, and we're thinking that this guy's probably got some fancy sports car. We're going to go out and have a hell of a time. He pulls up in his Mazda Miata. Yeah, and if you're not familiar with one of those tiny cars, they're barely big enough for 2 people, let alone 4 people. So Kyle and I cram our asses into this back seat, and it's convertible. He's got the top down. We're flying down the interstate, the 51 here in Phoenix, and we just didn't know what the hell we got ourselves into at that point. We're screaming down the 51, top down, just having a hell of a time, and this guy, just met him literally minutes earlier. He drops us off at a bar, and thankfully it was not far from my house. It's about 1:30 at this point, so any place that we're going to, people were wondering what the hell we're doing. Like, why are you still drinking? And no, you can't come here. So we go in, we grab a drink, and we mosey on to the next spot over at 16th Street and Bethany Home here in Phoenix. And we end up grabbing one more drink before we decide, it's time to walk our sorry asses home. And this guy comes up to us, which again, let me just speak to the Marine Corps. Most Marines are very familiar with this, but when we're wearing our dress blues, somebody always wants to pick a fight. I don't know why. It's just one of those things that they want to flex and test out their muscles. So this guy comes up to us, and he starts trying to tell us that our uniform's out of reg. And Kyle and I, we were pretty certain that we had gotten everything up to speed. And this guy, I don't even remember directly, but he starts calling us out on our uniform, and then he tells us he was a sergeant first class in the Marine Corps, something like that. We're like, oh, really? Yeah, that rank doesn't even exist in the Marine Corps. And I'm getting in the weeds here, but at the end of the night, man, it was our own mock celebration of the Marine Corps birthday, if you will, is a going away for Kyle, getting out of the Marine Corps, and it was one hell of a night. And in any case, in lieu of celebration of the birthday, I wanted to share that. And, let me introduce Kyle. I'm going to start off here with a question like we do every episode. And the episode that we're going to talk, in today's episode, the question we're going to answer here at the end, today is November 8th, 2020. We have just recently learned that President-elect Joe Biden will be our new president in January. And I think that if there's anything that we can all be certain of, is that the political messages that are being fed to us for the last year plus are finally over right now. Dependent on whichever side you voted for, I think at the end of the day, we've got to maintain that perspective. And that's what we're going to answer here at the end. And so without further ado, here's Kyle. And let me just ask you real quick, what is it that you remember about that evening?
Not much. It was probably the best Marine Corps birthday.
How about the next morning? Remind me of what happened that next morning.
Oh yeah. You woke me up, I think, at 6 a.m. To go on a hike up a mountain, which I never planned to do again. And pretty sure I puked on myself.
Yeah, I got him up bright and early. We went to Squaw Peak. It's here in town. It's a great hike, and it is a little bit more difficult, especially if you'd been out drinking all night the night before. And I don't know what it was that I just felt that was needing to be part of Kyle's visit.
It was my crucible on the latter half.
Yeah, exactly. And with that, one thing that I also want to remind us of is through our conversation, we're going to really go back to those four G's that we have gone through on episodes 1 and 2, which is grit, grace, gratitude, and the gospel. And we're going to tie that directly into Kyle and, share our stories along the way. And, just rolling right into it, Kyle, when we talk about grit, I think that one thing that's pretty synonymous with, us fellow Marines is opting to make that decision to join the Marine Corps. That can play a role in it. But when you think about grit in particular, what does that mean to you?
I think that it means that if you want to develop or kind of move forward, you sort of have to get dirty and get uncomfortable and do something that scares you and persevere. And I think that's how you grow. And I think that's certainly a large part of why I joined the Marine Corps. I think every Marine recognizes that, in order to have some kind of legitimate rite of passage, it has to be gritty. It has to be uncomfortable and dangerous even, and something that will kind of give you a full array of emotions and experiences. I mean, as you know, it wasn't happy all the time. There was plenty of times that you kind of start to question your decision. But I mean, that's how you grow and mature. And
right, man. I think you hit on a lot of great points there, and specifically growth. And in the melting pot that is the Marine Corps, in the U.S. military for that matter, you've got folks that are from all walks. You could be from the inner city of New York, or you could be from a ranch in Texas or a blue collar, whatever that might be. And a little bit about Kyle growing up in Sacramento, and if I recall, having attended a private school growing up, and I don't mean that as any slight. I think that there's just an aspect of the military and the Marine Corps that people think it's a second chance organization, it's either jail or the Marine Corps, and that couldn't be furthest from the truth. And I bring that up because I want to ask Kyle, what was it about the Marine Corps, the military, that stood out to you as a path?
Well, I think that, I knew that the Marine Corps would be kind of the most blatant change for me. Like you said, me and our friend Eric have talked about this. When we joined, the joke was kind of like among our circles, like, why? They were doing so well. And where I came from, I mean, nobody did that really. I have a history of service members in my family. Even my grandmother was a nurse at Pearl Harbor. So, I have World War II vets on both sides. My uncle was career Navy. My dad was excluded from enlisting for medical reasons. He wanted to join the Navy, but he served in the Merchant Marine instead. And funny enough, he got a draft letter while he was in Saigon, Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, it was always something that was present there in my family, kind of, in the pictures on the mantle you'd see.
Right. So there's very much a lineage aspect there, and that was a part for me too. Both of my grandfathers served, and my great uncle was, in World War II, and I think that just that image that you see growing up, it's just something that has a way of being embedded in your mind, and
feel like you kind of have an obligation to live up to those ideals, or at least kind of what your forebears achieved.
Right.
I mean, and my great uncle especially was somebody that I really admired. He was the son of poor Polish immigrants, wanted to get into West Point, but you needed I think a congressional recommendation. And he studied hard, scored the highest in the nation on the entrance exam. Wow. He was colorblind, so he memorized the test, the vision test beforehand, passed it, somehow got that recommendation, and thereafter he was top of his class every year and went on to deploy and served in Africa and Italy, and won the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart. And
wow.
He died when I was in pre-deployment training, actually.
No kidding.
Which, yeah, that always kind of, I mean, you can't control it, but I always kind of regretted that because I would have loved to have, shared experiences with him afterwards. Because I remember once kind of tried to broach him about World War II, and he just, didn't want to talk about it.
Right. Pretty dismissive. Yeah, man, that's incredible. That's something, you and I hadn't really talked about that before. And one thing with that comes to mind is Kyle. I think where our relationship really grew together was he's an intellectual dude, and I say that as the fondest compliment, because I guess what I mean when I think of somebody being intellectual, it's that they've got deep thought that's critical and thorough, and in most cases logical, right? They still got opinions, but for the most part I think that there's a innate understanding there for both sides, and I say that with wanting to draw into also your reason for joining, right? There was that call to service, but speak also to that experience, right? To that experience that will forever be a part of your your makeup. You'll always be a Marine. You'll always have that period of your life that you experienced hardships that were self-inflicted, right? That you were really allowing to put a stamp on you. Kind of talk about that. And I guess I mean, because you go from the Marine Corps to working in Hollywood, right? It's a pretty big transition. So talk about that.
Sure. And, I mean, even before that, kind of what you were saying, I was in college when I dropped out and enlisted. So just kind of going back to your earlier question, I don't think that it certainly wasn't something, well, for me, it was something that I needed to do because, like I said, you kind of need that grit, that event,
Right.
that kind of rite of passage. But then afterwards, like you're saying, transitioning into civilian life, I mean, the skills that you learn, the experiences that you have, they can get you through anything, really.
Right.
And funny enough, I mean, in the film industry, there are kind of some similarities to the military. You have kind of a rank structure, you have the producers and the director sitting at the monitors watching a scene, and you don't just, barge in and,
right.
interrupt. You kind of have to go through the assistant director. And then it's a very transient lifestyle. You might have a project that goes in Ohio for 3 months and then a project in Arkansas for 8 months, which
right.
is what I've had the past couple of years. And, getting you used to long hours and weird hours and stressful situations.
And let me kind of get a little bit more poignant with my question. I think of the types of historic like intellects, like a Hunter S. Thompson, or let's say Ernest Hemingway, for instance. What they really source a lot of their storytelling abilities to is experiencing those very difficult times, and whether it's the military or whether it's it could be a variety of things. Was that ever something that you felt was part of what prompted that? Like, man, I kind of grew up this more or less neutral vanilla lifestyle. I wouldn't call it vanilla, but you hadn't really faced that type of difficulty before.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, I've always wanted to write, and I moved out here to do that. But what are you going to write about if you've never kind of gone out and experienced life, to include hardship and danger and suffering, and so that was definitely a large part of it. I wouldn't say, I certainly never wanted for anything growing up. I had a very comfortable upper middle class life. Like you said, I went to private school, I went to college for a semester, and I hadn't ever struggled, really.
Right.
And I kind of needed that, and I wanted to make my own way. And I waited longer than a lot of people. We had a 16-year-old in my platoon in boot camp, but I went off when I was 19 and have been financially independent, totally independent since, which really I think is the biggest gift that the Marine Corps gives you. But no, certainly I think that was a large reason of why I kind of embarked on this formative adventure, because if you don't, then you've got nothing to say.
Yeah, man. I think that with everything you explained, that's as a 19-year-old, I joined when I was 23, a little bit older, and that's a hard thing to explain to mom and dad, right? Their response is, well, what the hell do you need experiences for? Here, I've worked this life up to now to not have you do that, right? And it's a strange dichotomy there. And yeah, I hear you 100%. What were mom and dad's? And just again, a little bit more background that Kyle can go a little bit more into with going back to our question, perspective through politics. Kyle grew up more or less around politics. His dad still runs a very successful advertising agency there in Northern California, premised around political advertising. And I think that that's always been something that's fascinated me, because growing up, politics were never really a big part of our household conversations. I would say it was kind of something that I knew existed, but it I think that's fairly common. It wasn't a part of the day to day. But yeah, let's roll into that, Kyle. Like with politics, was that with what your dad does for a living? Was that ever something that was evident to you growing up?
It was our dinner table conversations. And my mom and my dad started this business together. They've had about 10 people working for them for 30 years, more than 30 years.
Wow.
But it took a lot to get it off the ground. I mean, when I was a baby, they would sleep on the floor in the office, or my mom would go to McDonald's to get me milk through the drive-through, because they didn't have time to do anything but get the business up and running. And they did. And it was, it had a great run. But no, my dad is obsessed with politics. It's his career. And one of the more important things that he taught me was that politics isn't everything. And that's why he's so passionate about it, because it's kind of like philosophy. It might be this sort of invisible, elusive thing, but really it's in your daily interactions with people at work. It's everywhere.
Right. No, it really is. It's in the fabric of so many parts of our life that I think when we see the political ads being driven down our throat, we want to deny that that's how it is. But in actuality, when we, open the lens a little bit, you start to realize, like, oh, wow, that does impact me.
You kind of have to have your thumb on the pulse as far as, your local, state, national politics are concerned, because that's how you get screwed otherwise. I mean, that's how, if you're ignorant, then you don't know what's going on in the state house, and then that directly affects you, either with your taxes or just local ordinances or whatnot.
Right. So with feeling that impact on a day-to-day basis, obviously, as a nation, internationally, we've all experienced COVID since, the beginning of this year. February, March is when it really started to impact us firsthand, with businesses closing, starting to work from home. And in Kyle's case, in the film industry, we're not going to make movies for a while. And that's so fascinating to me. It's one of those front-facing, almost surface-level things that you wouldn't really consider it. It's not going to the factory each day. It's going on set to shoot a movie, right? And explain that a little bit, Kyle. What that was like, being involved in an industry like that. How did it affect you guys?
Well, for me, I mean, one of the benefits of this business is you can get on a project and make a decent amount of money relatively quickly, and then you can take the same amount of time off, and there will always be some job popping up later. And I don't have kids. I've got a mortgage, but really no other debts or bills, nothing out of the ordinary. So I kind of use that model where I'll do a project and then take some time off. So I was on a movie in Ohio, and we were prepping it for a month and a half, getting ready to shoot. And the day before shooting was supposed to begin, Netflix pulled the plug. And
oh, wow.
The show went under. And, I thought, okay, fine. I mean, I'll just drop anchor for the holidays, because I've got a show starting up in March. And so
wow.
Didn't work. And I was looking at the bank account thinking, okay, I'm just barely going to make this work till March. And then COVID hit. And then it was a slow death of 2-week intervals. Everybody said, okay, the show's coming back in 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks would pass. Okay, another 2 weeks. And then finally, the prop master who hired me said, yeah, I'm thinking of getting my trucker's license. And that's when I thought, oh, wow, okay.
starting to get pretty bad.
Not coming back. Yeah, I mean, because there's no way to, I mean, I suppose we're doing it now, but to socially distance at least. I mean, you can follow COVID protocols on set, but you can't socially distance. You still have 100+ people crammed into a soundstage together.
Right.
So, we're back at work now. I'm back at work, fortunately. But it's, they're pretty rigid. Yeah. In terms of their protocols, we have to wear a mask at all times. When the actors are on set, we have to wear face shields. I get tested 4 times a week.
Oh, wow. That's nuts.
Yeah. And there are other people that get tested every day. So, we've had 2 people on the crew pop positive earlier. No one since, knock wood, but yeah, they're making it work because a lot of people were hurting for a while. I mean, it was, I'd say 98% of the business was just obliterated.
That's pretty intense. So being from California, you've obviously, grown up in the various things that happen to occur in that state. Granted, you grew up in Northern California, which most say is significantly different from Southern California, but then moving into pursuing a career in Hollywood, the film industry, you decide to set up shop in Los Angeles, and you're talking about becoming a homeowner and really trying and being accepting of putting your roots down in not only one of the hardest industries, but one of the more expensive, difficult places to live. So talk a little bit about that, as far as what convinced you that was what you wanted to do and what that's been like.
I've wanted to work in film in some capacity since I was a kid. I just always loved movies. I always loved writing, particularly. So that's always been a passion of mine. I wanted to write screenplays, write for TV. So I moved out here. There was some very thin connection. It was a friend of a family friend agreed to have lunch with me. And I used my GI Bill just to support me and go to film school, which was just a complete waste of time. And I said, as soon as I get a job, I'm going to drop out. And so a month after I moved here, this guy agreed to meet with me. I told him, I want to write, but I'll do whatever. I'll sweep the floor. I don't care. And a couple of days later, he emailed me. He said, a friend of mine, a production manager, needs a props PA. And a PA is a production assistant. It's, the bottom of the barrel. I said, yeah, absolutely. So I showed up at the Disney lot in July, my suit and tie, and walked into the office, and the prop master's there in like a Hawaiian shirt and shorts. He's like, wow, you are embarrassingly overdressed. Like, yeah, I can see that. But he gave me the job for that reason, because I walked in wearing a suit, fresh out of my separations class, in the Marine Corps. And I think I had my little folder too that they give you. Right.
Man, you rolled right into that. I'm going to quickly interrupt. You're talking about that grace and with that was shown to you with a conversation that you had with, a friend of a friend, thin line, that you were able to get set up, and here you are, brings you to the Disney lot, and you come in Step Brothers style in your tuxedo suit, and I'm sure it wasn't that exaggerated, but you
there weren't any coattails.
But yeah, man, roll into that, because I feel like with Hollywood in particular, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You really need somebody to extend you that grace to really give you a chance. And go ahead and continue, man.
No, that's 100% correct. And I mean, one thing that I've really learned since I've been down here is that, the nepotism is the business runs on it. Anyone who's had success you kind of start digging and you say, oh, their dad was a screenwriter, their mom was a producer, they're Hollywood royalty or something, which isn't to, I'm not bitter about that, but it's just something that's kind of important to know what you're up against. But no, I mean, the point being, you really rely on those people to extend that opportunity to you, to give you a chance, to be willing to sit down. This guy was a writer and he was willing to take time out of his day just to meet with me, never met me before, and got me on the other side of the gate, which I remember when I first moved here being so intimidating, looking at these studios thinking, how the hell do you even get in? How do you get on the other side of the wall there? So he did that. And then, after that, a props guy that I worked for as a PA, he helped me too. There was a movie that was flipping from non-union to union that got me my union days. And he called me about it out of the blue and said, hey, I can get you into the union, and it's giving me health care and a pretty good wage. And that wouldn't happen without him,
That's awesome. And Kyle, very humbly speaks about the beginnings, but let me just talk to you about big Hollywood here. He was talking about how intimidating those gates are. And for those of you that have been to LA, you drive by Paramount or Disney, you can see exactly what he's talking about. It's like, oh wow, that's where television and movie stars, movies are made. So I went and visited him. What was it, Kyle? It was probably May of last year, that time frame. And coming to town, and I just think it's funny, like Kyle talking about that. We go and meet at this awesome restaurant. I can't remember the name of it, but it's right outside of Paramount, where the studio Smokehouse. And that whole night, it was an awesome dinner. We had steak and prawns, and just an amazing night. And the majority of that conversation was these phenomenal stories that Kyle and his fiance were sharing, because his fiance works in the film industry as well. But it's so neat to hear that side of it, because that night, by that point, it was 4 years removed from what Kyle was just explaining. He's a professional at this point. He was telling me about, hey, yeah, we were just on that show, Dwayne Johnson was on it, or he's mentioning some of these high level actors. I'm just like, dude, like you're talking about this crap like it's just another day at the office, which it's cool, man, because I think that for most people that's nuts. You don't always realize like what the beginning looks like, right? Like, but anyways, I just wanted to share that because it's pretty cool. And with being able to have that afforded to you, that opportunity, where do you feel you've been able to show that, either for folks in your industry? Like, is it something that you feel not having that silver spoon, your dad wasn't a screenwriter, like does that kind of does that encourage you to be able to help provide opportunities for others? Or can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. And I think that, we need as many good people in Hollywood as possible. But actually an example of that, I did True Detective season 3 in Arkansas. And when we were 2 weeks into shooting, we were, I think, 3 weeks behind schedule, to give you an indication of how it went. So a 5-month job turned into an 8-month job. We were doing 6-day weeks. We'd get off on Saturday at 6 a.m. and have to be at work Monday at 6 a.m. Wow. It was crazy. We were in the rain and the wind and the hail, and it was just a brutal show. And it was a revolving door too. We had people getting fired, people quitting. And one of the guys that worked with me brought in his friend, this guy named Jared from Louisiana. He was almost 40, was kind of, moving around the country doing his thing. He's a musician, but he didn't really have like a solid income per se, something secure. And he came and we hired him as our props PA, just like I how I started. And he busted his ass, and he worked hard, and he immediately fell in with us and made an effort and learned, and he had a positive attitude, and he stuck with it till the end. And so I said, we gotta get this guy in. Like, we owe it to him to give him that opportunity, get him into the LA Union. And sure enough, the very same guy who got me in, I referred him to that guy who was doing a movie down south. He hired Jared as his PA, recognized, his ability, his personality, and he got him in. And Jared's in the union now with a pension
awesome.
And healthcare, and so absolutely, you have to recognize the opportunities that you have and pay them forward.
Oh, 100%, man. And I think that in just being able to do that, you've just it's got to be a prideful period. I mean, I could just hear in your voice talking about it. You were able to be a part of, giving this person a similar opportunity that you had afforded to you. And I got to draw back 1 second. So here you are working around the clock, 6 days a week for 8 months, rain or shine, people getting fired, revolving door, huge show, True Detective. I've never seen it, but I know how popular it is. My parents watch it, and I've heard. So it's so crazy to hear you talk about a television show that entertains all of us, and we just sit on our couch and enjoy on a Saturday night. Meanwhile, the grit and the time and the work that went into it, that's wild, man. Is that something that you guys, as a group, you guys got to be a blue collar, group, maybe not the actors per se, but unsung heroes behind the curtain.
The crew, very much so. And, we'd have that beer staying nice and cold in the cooler for wrap at 6 a.m. or whenever. But no, I mean, they say, you shouldn't see how the sausage is made. And, know that every frame of a film or TV show that you're watching is full of misery. No, but in all honesty, there is just a huge operation. Lights, vehicles, crew, costumers, set design, artists, painters, animal wranglers, getting funneled into one shot. And it's pretty wild. I mean, not the other day, this was before COVID, but we were filming in San Pedro at the port, and we had a drone shot. But when you're filming at the port, there's a lot of seagulls, and apparently they like to attack drones. And this one had a, $10,000 camera strapped to it. So we had a falconer on set who had a falcon to chase away the seagulls.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, it's so involved, and, most people, they just have no idea what goes into that little image. And
right. Yeah. A trained falcon protecting a drone with a $10,000 camera. Yeah. Do you see that in the credits? Maybe. that's
yeah, at the very bottom, maybe.
That's unreal, man. So with being involved and being in it, you talk about the army of people behind just that single frame. Meanwhile, usually it's just the actor or a few actors that are in that. Is there animosity between the two sides? Can you kind of explain that dynamic where you've got a pretty boy actor, that's either showing up, you've told me a few stories about this, showing up to set late, meanwhile you guys have been there since 5 a.m., for instance, and you can't start shooting until, Brad Pitt shows up. Or can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say anyone specific, but most of the actors I've worked with are very cool. They're very genuine. A lot of them recognize kind of the grace, the gratitude that you're talking about. They recognize that, I've made it. This is a dream of many people to be a working actor, and I'm it.
Right. So maybe don't name the bad ones. Name a good actor. Name somebody that you're like, wow, that guy's pretty damn cool. Like,
Mahershala Ali from True Detective, for sure. I mean, he would come to set, and his first order of business every morning was to say good morning to everybody on the crew. The dolly grip, the PA, he knew your name, because, you know, he recognized that, you know, he's the face of the show, but it's that funnel that I was talking. He recognizes that without this crew behind the camera, it's not happening.
right.
So he was very gracious. Scoot McNally, also on that show, he came from the crew. He was a set dresser.
Oh, wow.
Became an actor. Yeah. So you have a lot of these people who are very down to earth, but then occasionally, you know, you'll run into just a complete sociopath.
Right.
We had, there was a guy on one of the shows I worked with. We have, every soundstage has what's called an elephant door. And it's just this massive door, as tall as the stage. Who knows, maybe to bring in elephants back in the day into the soundstage.
Right.
But, I mean, like a semi-truck could fit through this thing.
Oh, wow.
And he would only come in and out through the elephant door. And you have to have a couple people pushing it open and pulling it closed.
That is hilarious, man.
Yeah.
That just makes me think of, hey, I asked for only purple Skittles. What the hell are all these?
I mean, like, there are those people.
That's hilarious.
And it's disappointing to see that because, you know, like you said, I mean, you're kind of going into your, again, gratitude. You think there's got to be a deficiency there for somebody who is so successful, who's living such a, you know, exciting, privileged, fortunate life, to then be so vindictive and so miserable, you know, and to want to kind of spread that misery. It's right. Unfortunate.
Yeah, and you don't often see that unless it's on TMZ. You occasionally see those outbursts. I think of Christian Bale on a few occasions has just gone ballistic on camera.
Fucking walk around and rip that. No, shut the fuck up, Bruce. Do I want? No, don't shut me up. Am I gonna walk around and rip your fucking lights down in the middle of a scene? Then why the fuck are you walking right through? Da-da-da-da, like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
I remember that phone call, but funny enough, I talked to somebody who was on that production, and they said, dude, the guy he was yelling at was just heinous. And they said Christian Bale's actually cool.
Okay, that's awesome.
You know, they recorded it at the right moment, I guess. And there certainly are those blow-ups.
So with that, we see what's publicized about Christian Bale. You know, we're only seeing one side of it. Meanwhile, you find out that guy that Christian Bale was going nuts on absolutely deserved it. And what that makes me wonder, so you've got the actor, and they're obviously, you know, the pivotal focus of the movie, right? The movie likely doesn't get made without them. Do they almost have a CEO, or there's got to be something that I think kind of makes the team surrounding them fond of that, like the desire to really be great, like to want to redo the shot, redo the scene. Like, is there something to that? Like, are they almost kind of like, granted, you've got the director, you've got the producer, you've got the, you know, bosses on set, if you will, but does the, you know, lead actor almost kind of play a role like that as well?
Oh, 100%. You know, sometimes the director will ask, okay, I was really happy with that take, but do you want to do another one? And the actor will say yes, because like you said, at the end of the day, it's their face on the screen. So they're absolutely motivated to do a good job, and you know, to make it look as good as possible. And
Right.
I think a lot of them, most of them are so gracious and so good to the crew because they know that that's our job, is to make them look good.
Right. That's a great point. And, you alluded to the similarities, the parallels between the Marine Corps and Hollywood, which is crazy, but I think I understand what you're saying, because in the Marine Corps, you've got this divide between enlisted and officer ranks, which it very much needs to exist. There are several reasons for that. However, in many instances, you will have officers that you absolutely respect and adore, while you've got others that you despise and hate to a degree, just because they take that rank or that power that they're afforded, and they use it in the worst way. And I guess just with moving beyond that, with your time in Hollywood, what's been your proudest moment to date?
Honestly, again, it'd have to be True Detective, because the feeling I got when we wrapped for good was, in all seriousness, close to what I felt after boot camp. Just knowing like this horrible chapter in my life is over, and I did it. Like, I finished it from start to finish.
Right.
We worked a 22-hour day, I think, our last day. We had one night shot at the end of the day, and we went so long that we were literally running to the next location as the sun was coming up, because we had to get this last night shot. It was when Mahershala was like stalking through the jungle in his Vietnam getup. He's running down the trail. I had his LBV out, like a Matador cape or something, threw it on him. He ran to set. They called action, got the shot in like one take. And then we wrapped up, went back to stage, started drinking beer, and went out and got brunch and had some mimosas. And it just was kind of that like afterglow of, oh my God, it's done.
Right.
Like, this is over forever. And we're still standing here.
That's awesome. And so when you guys are shooting like that for an 8-month period, are you often doing like a whole season? Like, is that several episodes? Like, what amount of work is being done in that type of time frame?
It all depends on the show. That one, yes, that was a full season. And so I guess it averaged out to about a month per episode.
Wow.
Because it's a subscription-based channel, so they do it up a little bigger, and it's a little more cinematic. But then the show that I'm on now is 6 episodes, and we're shooting less than 3 months.
Wow, that's wild. So being in that environment and really seeing a show unfold, especially as a popular show like True Detective, kind of keep going back to that. Do you have a lot of interest to watch the show? I mean, you essentially know what it's all about. You were a part of creating it. What's that like? Like, do you feel like you're still a fan of what you watch, or what you work on, I should say?
It's funny. I mean, yes, it's always interesting to see how it goes from the page to the physical production to what you watch. But, on stuff that I work on, I can't help but look at like the levels of their drink between cuts, or, continuity things, or, does the prop look okay?
Like,
luckily that hasn't like transferred over to everything I watch, fortunately. But the stuff that I work on, it's mostly just kind of technical.
Yeah, I mean, you know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to eat it.
That's too funny, man. Earlier on, we talked about your time in the Marine Corps and the fact that you were stationed with Marine Corps Special Operations Command one of the more elite, special forces in the Marine Corps and the military. And you had quite a few opportunities. As a photojournalist, you were able to do some things that not many of us get opportunities to do. For instance, you went to a survival school, which you told me some unique stories about that. You had some very thorough, in-depth pre-deployment training, and you went to jump school, which that's a separate story. And then ultimately, you ended up deploying to Afghanistan in 2012, and kind of just shorthanded, longhanded. Kind of go into that a little bit. What it was like to be assigned to a unit like that, to have some of those training opportunities, and then leading into your deployment to Afghanistan.
Well, I remember at Dinfos, at our schoolhouse, there was a rumor that there was a billet that had opened up there, and I asked for it, and I got it. I thought, oh my God, whoops, and then got there, and I was totally excited, but on the one hand, you've got this great opportunity to do something that's not many Marines get to experience. And I had opportunities literally in the form of really cool schools and training exercises and whatnot. But on the other hand, you just kind of feel like this giant dork because you show up and you're kind of among like the next evolution of the species almost.
You're a stagehand.
Exactly. I mean,
you weren't one of the main actors, like you weren't an operator with MARSOC. Hey, we're making these correlations.
Yeah, no, I mean, these guys are bodybuilders who are 6'5" and strapped with the most modern gear that you have, and they're badasses. They're like the guys going in doing the DA raids and jumping out of planes at 20,000 feet, or scuba diving, and you show up and you're like, okay, I'm here to take pictures. So didn't always get the best reactions, the warmest welcomes. So that was hard. Because you hear about the band of brothers and the camaraderie, and that's certainly something that I have with you and my Dinfos friends. But besides my kind of main mentor in my office at MARSOC, the public affairs office, I was kind of a lone wolf most of the time. I'd get sent out by myself to go in bed with a team in some different village. And then I'd do that for a couple months, and then I'd go do it all over again. So I spent a lot of time by myself in Afghanistan. About half of the time I was up at the FOB at our big base in Herat province, which was pretty quiet, very settled at that point. And then the other half of my time I spent in Helmand province at various what we called VSPs, which are essentially just fire bases, little remote outposts, and that was a little more sporty. But
so with that, man, I'm gonna jump in real quick. You're more or less by yourself, and one thing I want to explain is, as a correspondent, photojournalist in the Marine Corps, your duty, quote unquote, is to tell the Marine Corps story through photos, videos, written stories. And in MARSOC, this very, I guess, isolated, let's call it secret community, engaged in very high level operations, you're not going to go out and tell a story about what they're doing, right? Explain that side of it too, man, because you weren't even to a certain degree able to really do your job in that respect.
Right. That was something that was problematic. Yeah. Or yeah, interesting to me. You know, you've been trained to, hey, get these people out there in the newspaper, ask for their picture up everywhere, you know, and then you get to MARSOC and it's like, you know, we don't do that here. But I had more of a, because of my master sergeant, he kind of arranged for this. We sort of had more of an operational role, and we tied in with information operations at large. And so kind of worked with them. And then, you know, a lot of the stuff, it wasn't for naught, it was just archival. You know, they'll dig those photos out of the vaults in 50 years, maybe.
Historical reference.
Exactly. Then we'll have plenty of historical reference, which is important. I think, you know, even now, I wish I'd taken more pictures just kind of on my own to have from 100%. Afghanistan and the Marine Corps. So that is something that's important that I don't think can be discounted. But no, in the while you're there, while you're living it, you're not putting out a whole lot of stories.
Right. So it's like a perception back home is in the Marine Corps community, we're always watching each other, like what's so-and-so published. And I know that they're downrange. And meanwhile, Kyle, although it was, you know, I think fairly well known, at least with his friends and folks close to him, that he was attached to MARSOC. And hey, what the hell's Kyle even doing out there? So, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, man. And I think that you're you know, speaking with some humility, but the fact that not only were you by yourself, but you were with your mentor, Master Sergeant Kress, and kind of going place to place. But that there had to be, you know, especially hindsight, a lot of pride in that here you were, honestly, in more of an operational capacity. Like, you probably still were taking photos and archive, or, you know, getting that archival content, but was there also kind of a dependency on you, you know, with if you were attached to a team, like you had received similar training in some respects to what they had? What was that like working, you know, kind of hand to hand with some of these operators?
Well, you know, like I said, there was certainly that initial moment when you show up and tell them, and it kind of looks like their cords have all been pulled. Like, what? But
the hell's he doing here?
Yeah. And so there was always a period of kind of trying to get over that and
like you have to prove yourself,
ingratiate myself, and and show them, look, I'll stand tower watch, or I can stand watch. I'd like to go on patrols with you. I'm a Marine. So, you know, I made a point to do that kind of stuff and did stand a lot of tower watch, and you know, volunteered for other people's watches sometimes just to show them that, hey, I want to be, you know, contribute what I can.
Right.
And it over time it would kind of start to, you know, they'd open up and you know, let me out on patrols eventually outside the wire.
Right. Do you feel that with that, like over time and evolving that relationship, although you weren't able to communicate these stories at large, do you feel that you were able to, in your own vault per se, like capture stories that you're proud to have, that, you know, and working with some of these guys and knowing the missions they were involved on day to day, that you were able to establish that, if that makes sense? Like you're able to, in a way, like be a part of the story, although you weren't able to tell it necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, I was always kind of in awe of those people. I mean, you know, they're badasses. I mean, what they, you know, they were right where they wanted to be. Like, they want to be behind enemy lines, or, you know, as close to the fighting as can be. And they were smart and, you know, just experts in a whole range of skills, military skills. So, no, I'm very much proud of that experience. I mean, like I said, it's not like I showed up and I was one of them, you know.
Right.
But no, to kind of get in with them and you know, eventually get outside the wire and in some capacity, and you know, get in some of the same fights as them. No, it's something that I'll always be proud of, for sure.
Yeah, man. And if you can, like, how would you sum up that experience? Let's say somebody comes up to you on set and, you know, they find out that not only are you a Marine veteran, but you deployed to Afghanistan, and they have that surface level information. What's a takeaway that you had from that experience that you feel almost embodies your time in Afghanistan?
Well, I think it kind of gave me a confidence, you know, the same confidence that I think any Marine feels just having joined and gone through it and come out the other side. I mean, anybody that enlists during wartime, I think, can come out confident and proud, knowing that I put myself out there, you know, when it was dangerous, and didn't run away or didn't quit. And
as a stateside Marine for eight years, Kyle's trying to make me feel better about myself and not answering the question. But I thank you for that, Kyle, and I agree with you. But let's get back. You know, you did deploy. So what's a takeaway? Like if you're to go and have that conversation with your uncle, who unfortunately passed away in pre-deployment training, man, that just resonated with me. Like, what, and you don't have to go into the details, but what's something that you may have shared with him, you know, and I'm not asking to get into any kind of graphic detail, but it could be just a day-to-day living situation, going to sleep at night while hearing, you know, gunfire and weapons go off in the background, or different experiences like that.
I think what I would talk to him about, it's a great question, would be the excitement that I felt in combat, which is something that I didn't anticipate. The fact that in kind of a very weird way, you kind of miss that sometimes when you're just in the daily grind. Just, I think that I'll probably spend the rest of my life processing kind of the enormity of that experience. I mean, right. When my grandpa died, you know, he had raised a family. He worked at Aerojet. Not my great uncle, my grandpa who flew B-52s during the war. You know, he had a long, eventful life. And when he was on his way out in the hospital bed, he was back in that driver's seat in the B-52, you know? So that's, I think it's, man. Yeah, to me, I think it's kind of somehow it's at my core, really. I mean, it was the most formative, important experience I'll ever have. And I think I'll probably spend the rest of my life asking why that is.
Right. Yeah, man. And I think one thing that stands out to me about that is the imprint that it so evidently had on your life. And I think that that's the case with so many service members, to, you know, depending on any extent of your service and what you encountered. And going into that question that we went over early on, I mean, we've heard a lot about Kyle's message and, you know, the various experiences he's had through Hollywood and his military service and his upbringing, and closing out on that last thought, his you know, lifelong understanding of what that very impressionable experience meant it's not just something you can answer overnight, right? And the perspective on politics, right? Going into that and having experience in military service specifically, especially this day and age, having been at conflict for nearly 2 decades. What does that mean for you, Kyle? Like, you grew up having dinner conversations about politics, whether you understood it at that time or not. You went on to serve in the military. Now you're in one of the most liberal communities that exists on the planet in Hollywood. How do you maintain that perspective through politics?
It's certainly hard sometimes, but no, I think perspective is crucial now more than ever. And I think, again, it would kind of go back to an experience that I had coming home from Afghanistan. We got back and we went to a Walmart to get some supplies for the barracks. And there was a rack of Halloween costumes for dogs. And I remember thinking, I am so lucky to live in a place where we have so much that we have Halloween costumes for dogs. And I think, to your question, despite all the noise and all the hyperbole and the catastrophes that, the pundits are talking about, and I think it's important to kind of stop and remember, look at everything that you have. I've got my family, my fiance, my house. That's what really matters. And that's what, what I should be focusing on.
Right, man. And I agree 100%. And I myself, I think I've probably mentioned a few times, I am not as, versed in politics as sometimes I wish I was. I feel like my naive, approach to it is helpful. It's almost like I'm avoiding the noise. That's probably not the best course of action. You need to understand and listen sometimes to have a perspective that actually suits the life that you live. And in answering that with what Kyle was saying, I think for me, in maintaining that perspective through politics, right? Kyle had said early on in our interview, politics, whether we want to believe it or not, they affect, nearly every facet of our life day to day, whether it's our kids at school, whether it's, weed being legalized in Arizona, which was just mentioned, or all drugs being decriminalized in Oregon, or in California, taxes being hiked up yet again, which Kyle, I know, has several opinions on that. But we're not going to get into that. But I guess I mention all of those things because that very much impacts our day-to-day life. And for me, I think it boils down to, and this may sound selfish, but I look at my income, for instance. I look at my way of life with the industry that I'm involved in, and I listen to some of the pundits to a degree, like listen with openness, I would say. But simply put, this isn't like a direct answer, but it's hard. It's hard to keep perspective through politics. You've got so many messages coming at you 100 miles an hour, and I think that at the end of the day, you've just got to pause for a second, right? You've got to allow yourself to process it and realize and take the time to, I think, how do you maintain perspective? Do the research. Don't, that's kind of where I feel accountable. I was going through my ballot this year, 60 some odd folks on there, which I imagine quite a few people can probably relate to this. I didn't know half the names that were on there. And I think that for me, in answering that perspective in politics, is become educated. Learn who your local representatives are. Learn who your state stakeholders are and what they're trying to address for your community, for your state, for your country, right? And I'm saying this directly to myself because it's always been something that I've been more or less guilty of. Is just, let me say the cliche term, my vote doesn't matter, right? And granted, you can say that either way, but I think that your understanding of the information that your vote translates to does matter, right? You know, at the end of the day, that's putting somebody in a seat that is going to make changes that will affect your kids in school, your job in your respective industry, and who knows, among many other things that affect you day to day. But yeah, man, and Kyle, we're going to kind of start wrapping this thing up, man, but one thing that I wanted to be sure we touch on is, you know, let's not forget the Marine Corps birthday is here in a few days. Cheers, Kyle. We've both been having a drink here. And Kyle, you've been in California now, back in Southern California specifically, for about 6 years. You bought a home there, which, man, I've always been so proud of you as a close friend that you were able to do that, because I just think that's such an awesome accomplishment. It's one thing to buy a home somewhere, but as a you must have been 27 years old, 26 years old?
27, yeah.
And you buy your first home in California. Now let's be specific. It's Southern California, but Kyle, this white bearded private school individual from Sacramento, he bought a home in Inglewood. And for anybody that's familiar with what's going on there, that's where the new Los Angeles Rams stadium is. There's a lot of gentrification that's going on, and, you know, reestablishing that area. The Clippers are getting ready to put a new arena there. And Kyle was, you know, to his credit, very much a believer and a part of that. And that's awesome. I think that's what it takes for people to really start to see change. They have to be willing to put in that sacrifice and that perseverance to be a part of it, not bitch about it. However, living in California, I think many know that there's a lot that's gone on there, especially during the last 8 months. And Kyle, I want to kind of hear about that from your perspective a little bit.
Well, everything you've heard is true. You know, I was born and raised here. My dad was born and raised in California, and we both are looking to get out ASAP. I think by most metrics, it's a failed state. And, you know, for the longest time, I thought, oh, this is Hollywood. This is where you have to be in order to make it. But in the time I've been here, I've learned, well, for writing, that's certainly not true. But even for production, I mean, the last few years I've worked in Ohio, Portland, Washington, Arkansas, all over the place. So there are always movies and TV shows going on anywhere in the country. So it doesn't really matter where you're based out of, except when you take into account cost of living, taxes, traffic, crime, homelessness. And so
a lot of these things that you can't control, right? Like that you don't really have in living there. It's out of your hands, and that's kind of what makes it hopeless.
Absolutely. And so it just knowing that you could work anywhere, it doesn't really make sense to put up with that stuff anymore. Especially knowing that you're not really getting much bang for your buck. And a friend of mine had a good point. He said a lot of LA's allure, or the reason for its population, is just FOMO. It's just people who have to be in LA because LA is where things happen. But COVID, you know, the last 8 months kind of blew all that away. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's really nothing here that I couldn't have somewhere else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I think just to sum it up, what Kyle's trying to say is, you know, for all of those folks that live in these great parts of the country, like Phoenix I love living here. It's obviously evolved quite a bit, or Boise, Idaho, or Wyoming, or Montana, or, you know, Utah. Kyle's just letting you know he's on his way. So
I will change my plates before I arrive.
He's going to be that new California neighbor that tells you how bad it was and nice to meet you. But you know what? To Kyle's credit and to his point, He's not the first and he won't be the last, because I think that everything he said is not only accurate, but when you've got a say in the matter, when you've got a choice, do something about it. And I think that that's something that's got to be understood with these folks, that if you're living in California and understanding the cost of living and, the expenses that are incurred, and with the industry that you work in, if you've got the ability, wouldn't most of us do that? Wouldn't we make the choice to go move somewhere else that, we could raise our family with less crime, with a better cost of living? And anyways, Kyle, I just give you some shit, man, but it's all true, and I think that there's just an understanding that as long as they're okay with leaving, just I think one thing that's important to mention, remember why you left California. Don't bring it with you. And I'm not saying that's Kyle directly, but I think that's got to be understood. Like, man, I hated that about California, but you know what? I hate this about Boise. I want to kind of bring some of this California in with me.
Yeah. Let's bring home with us.
Yeah.
The home that we just fled from.
Man, you know what though, Kyle? I'm so glad that you were on today. We got to talk about some things that even in the past 10 years you and I haven't chatted about, and and discussing our time in the Marine Corps and working in Hollywood, and just some of those experiences around politics that you grew up with. I really appreciate having you on, Kyle, and I know that it's one thing that it's always important that we connect with our fellow Marine brethren around our birthday. So make those phone calls, and veteran or still active, it's important to remember our roots and that brotherhood that we all come from. And yeah, Kyle, was there anything else that you want to add, man?
Happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday, brother. Man, hey Kyle, I'm sure that we will talk again here soon, and you guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and just remember, in the midst of everything that's going on and maintaining that perspective, it's important that we understand what creates that perspective, doing our research, doing our due diligence, and maintaining those values that I would say for the better part of most of us are instilled. We do not want ill or bad intent at our core, the majority of us. And I think that as long as we maintain that, we're going to be just fine. And at the end of the day, hey, we'll still wake up tomorrow, and hey, like Kyle said, we've got costumes for dogs in this country, right? Let's understand how fortunate we are in so many respects. Kyle, thank you again, brother, and I will talk to you soon, man.
All right, Tyler.
Bye.
Thanks.
You've been listening to My Dead Brothers podcast with Tyler Bolken. We are not guaranteed tomorrow. Tyler talks about the 4 G's: grit, grace, gratitude, and gospel. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show, and we hope that you were inspired, and we hope we've helped you get in the mindset of not holding back in your life. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at Tyler Bolken, and visit the website at tylerbolken.com for more information. Till next time, remember Proverbs 27:1. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. This is My Dead Brothers Podcast.